suddenly stood up on and what happened. So the database version was SQL 2008, authentication was LDAP, and this is kind of a map of the views that we had. We did originally have a HR system going in and the student record system, which was SITS. We had application and award tracking coming in from Aggresso, awards management, and we had project information coming in from Aggresso, the financial module there, and we had a custom portal stood up as well in 2012, and this is sort of in run-up to the previous ref. So Pure was shiny and new. There was a big institutional push towards getting it live and getting it syncing with all these different systems. All of these are views to directly in system. It's not done by a data center or anything like that. So when we come to 2019, a few things are broken. We don't have a link with the HR system anymore because a new HR system was kind of spun up, and it was just the sync was never replaced. SITS is still going. AAM is on pretty shaky ground because no one has credentials to the server, so that's going to die. And the link to Aggresso, the projects module, that died quite early on as well. In addition to the custom portal, we also have Aston Publications Explorer that was powered by ePrints and as the repository. We were still on SQL 2008 as a database version, which would have caused serious issues with 5.15, where I believe that's no longer supported. So, okay, why did Aston choose to go with being cloud hosted? So the original Pure was originally spun up on a virtual server, shared, basically. So, and I believe it was spun up on specifications that were pre the ref module, and I think the ref module actually boosted the original sort of the requirements. So already, I'm not sure how performance would have been even before that. So performance was up and down. Some users were experiencing load times in the ref module of a minute, or even on their personal screens, they would experience load times of maybe 30 seconds or more, and it would vary throughout the day as well, so it was really not optimal. And there was just a general lack of funding at the university to support the sort of the server management and the application updates. So they were happening just sort of quite slowly, and if there was a sort of a blocker, actually resolving those blockers was turning out to take quite a long time. So we did a stable platform for doing the ref on. So that's one of the main drivers for doing this. And also we had a very outdated custom portal, which will show you some lovely screenshots for you to ogle at. And there was a move from marketing to kind of move away from having school-based profiles. So all of our schools were doing profiles very differently. Different information, sometimes they just weren't being updated regularly at all. So we wanted to kind of put that information, that power into the hands of the academic. So let's do two things at once. Let's move from being locally hosted on some fairly terrible hardware on and sort of ditch our old portal and get a 2-for-1. So talk through.
Yes, so as you can see, this is what our custom portal looked like. It's pretty awful. And this is what actually quite a good person's profile looks like, or looked like, on the custom portal. And Professor Bill has spent a long time adding information to it to make it look nice, but most people had not. So it's pretty ugly. So again, one of the drivers for really moving to something nice and shiny and modern. So there we go. So this is more you, I guess.
All right, so before kicking off with procurements, we did have IT look at how much would it cost for us to actually move to dedicated hardware locally. And then by the time we compared that to the cost of going for either a dedicated or standard package, and also factoring that we are just going to actually get any additional person support to help do the application maintenance and sort of server maintenance and all that, those problems aren't going to go away if we get some dedicated hardware locally. So when we started getting quotes from Elsevier, actually, that quickly became obvious that it was the best way to go. So then there was a choice between either dedicated or standard. And we went with dedicated, simply because with the ref, we thought it was very important for us to control the timings of our updates. And also, in general, if you have other cloud systems, our HR system is cloud, so when eventually we do sync from that eventually again. Our finance system is also cloud as well, so and they'll be a bit more strict about when they expect us to take updates. So we actually want some more slack in our chain of systems, really, where we can afford it. So going dedicated was the obvious option for us. So procurement was relatively quick. We signed the contract, I believe, in May and started the project. I think it was my first week at Aston in June. We decided whether we were going to have a project comms based on the institutional wiki or Jira. We decided to go with the institutional wiki because I think that's it's easier to generally trace back your config decisions and your comms with your implementation manager there. That's my personal preference anyway. We did move a little bit away from managing everything on the wiki later in the project, but if someone else comes to kind of scrutinize what we did, I think it's a pretty easy way to work back through those decisions. So in terms of timing and tasks, we decided we were going to have weekly updates between ourselves and the implementation manager. The team was pretty small. It was me, Lee, and an IT guy who would sort of manage contacts within his team for things like authentication, and the network team as well. But yeah, we did it with 3 people basically. So the timing, the wiki was also really helpful because on there you'll have the plan for actually, these are all the steps you need to get to go live. So that was another really cool part of the wiki. So actually the process of standing it up. So we had to do a local server file transfer to a WebDAV. I'd never used a WebDAV before, and so basically it was our IT guy who did that for us. We had to test the whole sort of transferring from being locally hosted to standing it up in Amazon. So the first thing that needs to be done really was to migrate from being SQL 2008 to Postgres. So once that was done by the Elsevier team, they could then stand up the test environment in Amazon. And we set about to comparing our local data to the data that was actually transferred over. We did a few things like comparing the settings, the config in the admin menu, which was a joy to work through, the admin menu. And there were a few things we noticed. Not all of the syncs had been taken over at that time, but that was fixed in subsequent transfers, so that was fine. We had to do we did some simple checks, like the amount of record numbers you have. You know, were they the same at the time you did the transfer and when they arrived in the environment? So pretty simple stuff like that. But also doing the exports of the records in Excel and just comparing them. And also your reporting module as well. Is that behaving exactly the same as it did with your local pure? And in all cases, we didn't find any differences with the data there, so we were really happy with the transfer. And we just did what was the standard Aston test suite of just making sure that the environment actually still worked. I guess you would do every time you do an update. And again, no problems there either. So that was all. The verification of the transfer was pretty simple. We had a choice whether or not to update to the latest version. So when you're taken over, you'll always initially be taken over on the sort of the same version that you're on, and then given the choice to update and test the latest version. We decided to minimize the change. We just kind of decided to stay on 5.13, which is what we're currently on. So we did encounter a few issues, mostly around the syncs. So this came up fairly late in the project for me. In September, I mean, August, not too much happened in August because everyone was away at varying times, and it was such a small project team that, we're all single points of failure, really. So most of the work actually got done, I would say, June and September. So it was only in September that our IT guys sort of started voicing concerns about the actual method we'll be using to transfer the syncs over, whether we should be using an SSH tunnel or site-to-site VPN. And we had a bit of back and forth with Jens and Soon, and it just, the site-to-site VPN just wasn't an option. I know we're not the only institution who prefers site-to-site VPNs, because I believe Bristol are going through this process now, and they have also arrived at the same decision where SSH tunnel isn't optimal. Their IT guys don't view it as optimal for sending views over, so they're now looking at doing everything in XML. Fortunately, we don't have that option at Aston because we don't really have anyone who knows how to map to XML. We are looking at procuring a new sort of integrations platform. That's probably going to be two years down the line, and really we just wanted to keep the student sync going. So we are going down the SSH route, which has taken quite a bit of political wrangling internally to kind of make that solution fit. So I would recommend you make sure your IT guy is happy with the choices available, probably really from the start during procurement. Make sure they are actually engaging with it. Otherwise, this will come up during your project and potentially delay you. We had to discard the Aggressor Awards Management sync. Not having credentials to a server was a major issue. That prevented us from being able to replicate the data from there out into a sort of a data center in the DMZ of our network. So we are saying goodbye to that one, but we are going to the UPN model and reworking that sync into a new costing tool anyway. So I'm not too bothered about that. What I would say is, though, we've already gone live, and we did so without having the student feed coming in. We kind of took that decision on the basis that we can do without it for a few months. We already don't have a HR feed, which is already kind of the biggest source of grief. So just waiting a few months to have a student data update wasn't really the biggest issue out of the entire thing. I just want a new HR feed, please. So we then had to move on to test the import sources, so testing whether your outputs could still come in, and again, no real issues there. The one we had the biggest issues with was ORCID, just getting them to be aware of the updating the URIs for redirects, so we could test against their sandbox server. And again, that's something we had to repeat as well for them to recognize the new URL when we went live as well. So got that working. Authentication with LDAP, we're still on LDAP. We got some updated settings. We had to whitelist the IP addresses for the Amazon environment. We did that, and we actually had a guy from IT help us do the configuration in the server, so that was sorted as well. And we have a connector with ePrints, so Lee Jens worked with CoSector to kind of make sure that still worked, and that was fairly straightforward as well. We had a choice over the mail settings, so we could go with a local SMTP or Elsevier SMTP. We decided in the end there wasn't much between them, but the idea of having emails come from an Elsevier address rather than a local Aston one made us think actually maybe people would take more notice than yet another internal system spamming them, but there wasn't much between that. It was a little bit simpler though. So the portal.
So I got to do the fun stuff of setting up the portal, and it was actually just amazingly easy and took basically no time at all, which was nice because I'm really busy. So the things that we had to watch out for is that the custom portal had a lot of different settings on it that I was not aware of, that was then made aware of after we moved to the standard portal, the hosted portal. So we needed to make some adjustments for that. And then just, again, look at what things we were going to keep and what things we were going to ditch. And so, or especially around content types. And so you do get a lot of choices for that as well, which is quite good. And one of the features that we stole from Dundee was having a large login button right at the top, just to make because our researchers are using Pure, their profiles now as their main institutional web pages, so we want them to actively log in and update information whenever they can. So flagging that they can sign in from Aston Research Explorer was quite important to us. And so, again, this is what we have now, and if you remember back many slides to what we had before, this is a vast improvement. And again, just in the configurations was choosing what metrics to show, and so we went with altmetrics and plumx. Again, these are all configurations that you can make in the admin screen. So really easy, and you can change them and update them whenever you want to. And this is the same person, Rosalind Bill, again, and this is what her profile looks like now. And again, compare it to what it looked like before. So this is much cleaner, it's more modern, it's more in line with the university's marketing guidelines, as you can see. And if marketing decides to change colors, again, we can always update this whenever we want to. So.
Okay, so the actual process of going live. I felt I wasn't really making much progress with the sync issue. So our student data guy is very much helping us out in his spare time because there's no central resource for integrations. So I thought, okay, this is just going to delay the project and we need to move on so we can actually test the new version and get it live. So when we do our unit of assessment reviews, we're actually doing it on sort of a new reporting module and the latest ref functionality as well. So that really drove my choice to kind of get a date booked into the calendar. You've got a choice of whether it's the weekday or a weekend. We decided to go for a weekday, simply because we probably weren't going to get people to be able to come in to support us. The actual process was we blocked users from Pure on the Friday through to Wednesday morning. So by Wednesday, we were live again, essentially. So on the Monday, testing and verification process happened the same as before. So we had to do a dump into the web dev. That took quite a while because we copied absolutely everything from our server over. I don't think we'd appreciated quite how long that would take. So that kind of delayed us by a few hours, waiting for our IT to get in and do the transfer, so that took a while. You also at the same time took the custom portal offline. We could then, Elsevier could then go through the process of standing up a test environment, and we could do the same verification as before. The only thing we found, and actually it wasn't found during that process, was the audit logs were not showing up against record content, and that was because old installations of Pure have them kept in a different directory, I believe, so it just needed to be moved to that directory, but we didn't pick that up actually during the testing and verification process, so that's something you probably want to look at. Once the custom portal was taken offline and a new Pure portal stood up, it's just a process of uploading the config again. So we had the images uploaded and the all unit visibility settings adjusted, so everything was showing properly and we were ready to go live. We re-enabled what syncs we were actually carrying over, and we made the DNS change. So we kept the Aston URL for for Pure and for the portal as well. And now we're kind of in the mop-up phase of where we were still probably exploring what to do with the different settings in the portal, but there hasn't been that many issues fall out of it. Some suggestions.
Yeah.
mostly
Okay.
this is around the portal.
Yeah, so just some of the things that we found in the mopping up phase. Like I mentioned, there were quite a few settings on the custom portal that we weren't aware of that needed to be set in the hosted portal. Weird things going on with Google Links, and I raised a Jira about this, and apparently this is going to get fixed in a future release. But if you find an old record in Google, it gives you basically a 404 error, but if you find the same record through the portal, it works fine. So something strange was going on with the links there. The request a copy button wasn't showing, and this turns out to be a very strange config that was eventually flagged to me. And so once I set that, then it works fine now. And then the default visibility and workflow settings weren't copied over. So we only show things that are validated in our portal, but when we went live, everything was showing. So we had to go back and change all of those configs. And then again, it's just a matter of regularly checking the guidance for release updates and things like that. And a few notes on features we would have liked to have straight out of the box rather than having to request development on these. Things like the links in the footer, you can only add one to your data protection. There's one link that you can add, but we would really like to have more links, things like takedown policies and stuff like that. As it is, we've had to put it into our contact form, but the contact form doesn't allow HTML. So people will have to manually copy and paste the link to our takedown policy to find it. So it's just an extra step that really doesn't need to be there. Things that we also would like to have is Twitter handles for our organizational units. At the moment, you can only put them on person profiles. The header is it's not responsive scale. So as I found because I set it up on my very widescreen desktop monitor, and when I look at the same thing on a laptop screen, which is much smaller, it cuts off the far right-hand image. And you can put that into a field for right-hand image in the portal, but it sort of floats in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't match our marketing guidelines, and it kind of just looks a bit terrible. So we would like to have responsive scaling of the pages. And as this has been Jira'd many times in the past, we would like an easy way to lock out users from our system when we need to make major changes like this. So we had a workaround, which was we just disabled the LDAP authentication for all but a handful of users. So that's how we got around that, but it would be easy if we just had a config in the admin screen where we could just lock people out without having to go through this hassle, and slightly risky hassle as well. So just some suggestions. Oh yes, pro tips? Yeah, you want to do those?
Yep, sure.
Okay.
We had issues to begin with because LDAP obviously wasn't working when we initially moved to the cloud, so make sure you have 1 or 2 administrators set up which don't authenticate by external systems, just so you can get back on the system easily when you have your new Amazon environment or testing environment stood up. Yeah, make sure people responsible for sync network access actually understands what the options are early in the project. And yes, if you've got the option of somebody helping you to do the data dump the day before you go live after your server's done a backup, that would probably be a lot quicker than doing it the morning of, because that added a few hours to our go live time. Check the history logs and records, because they may not be present when you, depending on how old your local server is, and get your marketing people pinned down on branding. They just wouldn't tell us what the new guidelines were going to be for ages, so we had to make them up in the end. And if you're a small team, just sort of manage your expectations, because you've tried to do this over August. Probably most of you aren't going to be in either at one point or others, so just sort of, yeah. So expectations going in, I knew we were going to have a performance boost, but I was really impressed by just how smoothly the system was running, the ref module as well. I was initially skeptical of, we're doing the Pure Portal project at the same time, but actually that turned out to be so easy. It's like doing migration and the Pure Portal. Really, the portal is no additional effort if you've got good data already for your people already in the system. Yeah, minimal issues. Academics are very happy with the look of the new portal as well. Altogether, I'd say it was a reasonably clean breakup with no drama. The old server has been archived and no longer works. But this is probably one of the best bits of feedback we got from it as a result of doing the portal. This chap thinks the portal looks lit, whatever that means. But I think it's good, apparently. So, yes, any questions? Do you have time for questions?
Yeah. You have any questions? Yes.
Hi, it's Chris William from LSE. I just had a question on the difference between dedicated and standard. Is the only difference literally the ability to define when you take an upgrade?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
I have a slide on that in about 5 minutes, so I'll cover that. But basically, yes, it is when the updates are entered, either automatic or on request.
I have one question concerning the what you say, the settings. How much time did you have to sort of solve all those settings you didn't like, and how easy is it to
is this the portal?
prepare for all that stuff? I mean,
is this the portal you're talking about? Well, we had a review meeting with Jens, and we went through the settings in about an hour, where we learned what they were, and I think between us, you did most of the work, what, 3 hours worth?
Yeah, so when you start the project, you get the basic guidelines and all of your options. And so I went through all these options early on. And so when it came time to make the configuration settings, I knew exactly what I wanted to be on the portal. So it was just a matter of talking with Jens and saying, I want this, I don't want that. So it was really easy and straightforward. And in terms of when we went live, finding some of these things, so we went live the last week of September. And so we've only had it for a couple of weeks now, and it's just a matter of, in the past, like, oh, that doesn't look quite right. Let's go in and find that in the config settings. So it's really, really, really easy. That's all.
So thank you very much.